open. Call the meeting to order.
Oh, yes, also call the meeting to order.
All right. I reviewed the minutes. They look fine to me.
I agree.
So you
Meeting minutes.
So you moved or?
Well, I thought we'd just make sure nobody had anything to put in.
Okay.
Does anybody have any additions, omissions, or corrections to the meeting minutes?
None.
I moved to approve the meeting minutes.
Ask a question. Was there a quorum here? There was last time, because I thought maybe up to 3 people were missing.
No, I believe we had a quorum. We did. I think we had 2 missing. 610, 410.
I think you and Jane didn't make it. Chris was a little bit late, but she made it.
I wasn't here last time either.
Yeah, you weren't here. Alan wasn't here, and Chris was late.
Okay.
So I'd second to accept the meeting minutes.
Okay. I believe we need roll call vote since we're hybrid. So Stephen, Natalia, and I.
Laura, have I?
I can't vote, I wasn't here.
Okay. Abstain.
Kathy Robertson,
Jane Snellman have to abstain. I wasn't here.
I've been before.
Okay.
I don't think I can abstain.
And Jean.
Jane, I wasn't here, so I have to abstain as well.
I think
I heard you, Jane. Jean,
Okay.
I said.
Jean and Jane sound too close together, but yes, I.
Okay. All right. Okay, Emily.
Fantastic. Next is to elect committee officers. So I think we started a discussion about this at the last meeting. A few people had volunteered. Someone might have gotten volunteered who wasn't at the meeting to serve as an officer. So want to proceed with any nominations? We need a chair and a clerk, definitely. The chair is usually just the person who just will go through the meeting agenda and bring the meeting to order. Leading the meeting, though I'll probably be mostly leading the meeting. And the clerk is responsible for meeting minutes. Since I think we're going to move forward and have hybrid meetings, probably at every meeting, that makes it easy for me to record the meetings. So if the clerk either can't make it to a meeting or just wants to review the meeting later and really just participate and pay attention during the meeting and write up the minutes and take notes on that later, that's a possibility. Because I'm going to save all the recordings for these meetings. And I can send like a template for the minutes as well. So, and also it would be nice to have like a vice chair, or sometimes we've had co-chairs just in case like the chair can't make it to a certain meeting. It's pretty much up to your decision.
Okay. Anybody have strong feelings with chair, co-chair? Are we good with that arrangement? Does anybody think that we don't need a co-chair?
Well, the chair isn't going to be here always, I assume. So you would want somebody that would have a fill-in role, I think.
I agree. I think a vice chair would be better than a co-chair. You know, it's like better to have like one person run a meeting. But I think I agree with Alan. See, Alan, people do agree with you. Good ideas.
Okay. And then how would we like to proceed? Do people want to offer up their services as chair and co-chair, or do we want to just take nominations, or how would you like to
I
proceed?
think the first one is best. If people are interested in a particular position, why don't they express it? Because I might suggest that you be the chair, and maybe you don't want to be the chair. So
I agree with that one.
And Kathy expressed an interest in being chair last week, and I certainly nominate her to do that if she wants to fill that role.
I would be interested in being chair as well. So we could figure out what makes the most sense,
well,
when can be chair.
nomination, Steve. So I would nominate then Laura, if you're the one that expressed you wanted to be chair also. Oh, sorry. Who is it? That's the screen. Who was the second person who asked for it?
Kathy.
I think
Right. One.
Yeah, I asked for it, I could Steve's interest.
You were.
Yeah.
All right, I'll nominate you then.
Okay. So there's a nomination on the floor. Is there a second to the nomination?
I'm sorry, I'm confused. The nomination was for, I have my back turned. We're appointing. For Steve or for?
Alan made a nomination for me for chair.
Okay,
So would there be a second to the nomination?
I'll second that.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for chairman?
Again, I think Kathy expressed an interest in being chair last week. Or not last week, our last meeting.
Last meeting? Okay. All right. So we have a nomination. Is there a second to?
I second that.
You second. Okay. So
If I can make a suggestion, I'd like to hear from the two of you, assuming you're going to be the only two running for office, why you're the right person for the position.
Want to go first?
ladies before John.
Oh,
What a gentleman.
no, I mean, I've been, honestly pushing for this for a long time. When I ran for planning board, one of the reasons I ran and I would talk to people about was I wanted to, I run into so many people, especially seniors that want to downsize and there's no place to live in Upton. There's a woman next to me who has Parkinson's. Or her husband has Parkinson's. They live in a house that's built in the 1700s. They're stuck in it. And if they want to move, they have to move somewhere else. People have kids that can't afford to move to town. Basically, people can't move to town. And then when I was working on the sort of the opposition to the 40B project that was being discussed off Mechanic and Fowler Streets, one of the things that became apparent was that people don't understand what affordable housing is. People think affordable housing is actually affordable housing, and it's not. So I really got involved with all the nuances of that and the importance of building both real affordable housing and affordable housing as the state defines it. So I kind of became immersed in that. So I've been really enthusiastic for quite a while about making sure that, Upton develops housing that's affordable for all people, both that suits the 10% required or not required, but strongly suggested under the law unless you want to have, developers come in and tell you what to do, but also housing that's affordable to, working people, teachers, the police officers, EMTs, seniors, kids, we just need to diversify our, the housing that we have in town. And that's why I'm very interested in doing this. Thank you.
So my reasoning really would be a little bit different. I'm more of a structured person. I like to make sure that we do things, correctly, make sure that everybody on the meeting kind of gets an equal say, an equal time to pose questions, ask questions, just kind of run the meeting in an orderly fashion, as opposed to us just kind of throwing out different ideas and ad lib, just kind of working around the room. So that's kind of, my interest in it. I as well am very interested in the housing production for town. We run into this a lot really with senior tax relief and senior tax work off. I'm not sure we're going to solve really any of our long-term problems with this committee, but it's certainly a good first step. We've always found when we're trying to help people in town that it's the threshold really that's the problem. It's what the threshold of considered affordable or the low, basically the lowest amount of threshold is really what everybody seems to be over those numbers. So again, I'm really more of a numbers guy, but that's really my thinking as far as wanting to serve as chair.
Just as a thought, if I could speak one more time, is, we had talked earlier about not having co-chairs, having a chair and a vice chair instead. And it seems that from how Steve presented and how I present, I tend to be a policy person. I tend to be really good at running meetings because I like to keep them short, because I have an old dog I need to get home to, but also I like short meetings. So, but Steve, as Steve said, he's a numbers guy, he's a process guy. We both, I think, have the same perspective on what, Upton needs. So I think we actually complement each other pretty well. So, I'd be honored to serve as a co-chair if that's what, if that's acceptable to you. And then, we can hammer out, I think, I would defer to you to run the meetings because you have a lot more experience at it than I do. And we can chat about, stuff between, when we're planning things. So I think that would, I'd be happy to do it that way if that's the will of this group.
That sounds like a way to get the best of both worlds, really.
Hmm?
I think that's a way to get the best of both worlds. That would be awesome if you guys could work together as co-chairs.
I didn't quite hear what you said. I'm sorry.
She said, did you hear what she
I heard
said?
what Jake
Yeah.
said. Alex said something.
I said, I didn't know that there's been enough discussion amongst the appointed members,
Okay, yeah.
because I thought we talked about we didn't want a co-chair.
Yeah.
So,
That's why I just threw it out for discussion.
Yeah, I'm not sure, how it would vary being co-chair versus a vice chair. I'm not sure how that would change things.
This is Chris. I would be happy with either situation. Whichever one everyone prefers.
Okay.
I don't know
think
the
also
difference
because
either.
you're probably the tiebreaker.
Well, I don't know the difference either between the two. So I would say co-chair then. But I don't know the difference between the two. Can anyone clarify that?
This is Laura. From what I just heard, I think Kathy deferred to Steve to run the meeting and they work together for the same goal.
Right.
I don't know if that's a co-chair, vice chair, or
Yeah.
if we, we have two people that both want the same job and Kathy just deferred to Steve to run the
Right.
place. That works for me.
That works for me as well as whatever works for everyone else. I'm not a good tiebreaker.
Okay,
Not
it
out
sounds-
controversy, huh, Christine?
Gene, you've been quiet.
Unusually so, yeah. From my perspective, and however we get the meetings run effectively and get through the process of producing the housing production plan, that's whatever's most effective with that. I don't see any real great policy role at this point for chair or not, so I think if we can dispense with the competition between chair and co-chair, if you can work effectively together, to me, it's, getting the product off the table and into our state system that's most important to me. So if we can work effectively as a group and there isn't competition between us in any way, that's the most effective way to get to an end product. So that's what I'm in favor of. If we can do it as co-chairs, that's perfectly acceptable to me. I don't think there's, any ego here. We're all here serving for the same reason. We want to try and advance the effort to get affordable housing here in town and to meet, the requirements of the state for affordable housing and high density housing. So I would like to move this forward, get the vote taken, establish that co-chairs are acceptable, and then move on with the meeting and get to the meat of our work.
Gina, you say that very nicely. So I agree.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, Gene, could you motion that? And
Yes,
we can just vote it and we can move on to the next agenda item. Or
sure.
the next person, which maybe, as Emily mentioned, maybe we need a clerk.
Yeah.
So we could fill these two roles and then we can speak about discussing a clerk.
I make a motion to have co-chairs and to have the two co-chairs as elected would be Steve and Kathy.
I second that motion.
I think,
Okay, we need roll call vote.
Gene, I think we have to just Gene, I.
Chris, I.
Jane, I.
Kathy, I.
Laura, I.
And Steve, aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously.
And may I make a suggestion? Maybe what we want to do is rotate meetings chairs, because otherwise it's going to get confusing. If one chair is going to operate the meeting, let's have that chair operate the meeting and call the motions. So Steve, it seems to me you're taking that role tonight. Maybe we can alternate next meeting. Kathy would take that role. Would that be acceptable?
Acceptable to me. I think we're both good at pushing meetings.
Yeah, I suppose we could do it that way. Does that make sense to alternate? Or do you want to just do it in the same fashion each time? It doesn't really matter to me.
Doesn't, I don't have a preference, you know.
Okay.
I do have one question. This has nothing to do with this. Is the vote taken? Can I ask a question?
The vote's already been taken.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's responsible for posting the meetings and sending out the reminders? Is that the chair or is that, sort of looking at you, Joe?
Usually it's the chair.
Do you want me to take on, we can talk later. Steve and I will talk later about assessing
Yeah.
roles. So we
I
don't
think
have-
actually Emily is probably going to set our timetable, and for the most part, I think Emily is going to set the agenda, is the way I understand it.
Yeah, so
you
I'll
can-
write the agenda. Mhm.
Yeah,
Send
and
it.
I think Emily, if you could maybe attach an email, as you did in the past, just maybe 2 weeks ahead of time, as you did the last time, and let us know if there's anything that any of us for that matter, on the committee may want to add to the agenda.
Sure.
But otherwise, I think Emily will set the timetable and set the agenda. So I think we're pretty good there.
Can I ask a question?
I think the
Yeah.
clerk, I think
Alan?
town,
My question is for the town manager. I want to make sure that nobody discusses what they should or shouldn't outside of this, because theoretically our discussion is supposed to be consistent with the open town meeting law. So I guess, Joe, looking to you with your expertise, let's say by chance I happen to see Laura at BJ's. Am I able to talk with her about, what's going on and what my thoughts are and hers, and we talk about something, maybe we agree, we're not, or are all discussions theoretically supposed to be above board and on the table? Not that that would be below the board, but what is your thoughts?
Oh, I think make sure I'm okay. Never know when I'm muted and then go talking for at length and then get yelled at to unmute my mic. So you are right that members outside are able to communicate. However, it's that line between what ends up being deliberation can be fairly gray, and it's just recommended that people stay away from making any sort of decisions. If it's broad, if it's something that is just conceptual in nature, there's not a problem. If all of a sudden it's like, you know what, we need to do X, Y, and Z that refers to some form of action, deliberation, even though it's doesn't constitute a quorum, still can violate open meeting law. So if it's one of those things that it's, you observe something, you had a thought, that's okay to talk about it. It's just once it starts becoming a decision, that's when it needs to be part of the body.
And that goes for email as well. I know I'll send out some emails to everyone. Try not to turn those into discussions, because that can be iffy as well.
going back to posting the meeting, just submit for a second, Steve. I think we established that the agenda would be set by Emily, but I believe since it is an open meeting, town clerk has to post the meeting on the town website. So once we have it, right?
Yes, absolutely. Our town clerk does that.
But usually the chair is the one that submits it to the town clerk.
Right.
At least for, planning board and Concom and other places.
Yeah, but again, I think Joe is attached to all the meetings and Paul is as well. So we'll have to make sure that, again, if the whoever's role that falls under, we'll have to make sure between the four of us that we make sure we get that posted with the clerk.
Right, exactly. I mean, Emily would come up with a draft, most likely be sent to chair, co-chairs, Paul and myself for any additional comment. If there's things that you feel are should be on there, we'd be looking just like Board of Selectmen provide your input, but then on a staff level, we'd be able to make sure that things are posted in a timely fashion, that meeting room locations are taken care of.
At risk for extending this meeting, I do have a follow-up to Alan's question because I'm a little bit confused. And do you want us to ask you to be, to just say through the chair, I'd like to make a comment, or can we just talk?
Well, I think in this instance, we're all free to talk.
Okay.
Right, the only time the questions come through the chair, I think, is when you're directing it to somebody outside of the meeting.
Okay.
Typically is how I always understood it.
Okay. But if, like, for example, with the survey that was distributed, I had some comments on it and I sent them to Emily and Joe and Paul. If I had done the comments earlier, my gut would have been to share them with the group. That it wouldn't have been a decision. It would have been here, because we're sort of editing a document, and to do all the, the thoughts. These are just my thoughts. They're not decisions. They're just thoughts, and recommend, what I, think. So we could do that between meetings, right? Because otherwise we're doing everything at meetings, and that would make the meetings really long. And we're not making decisions. We're not saying, yeah, we're going to do it. It's just, we're editing, we're sort of making comments on stuff. That seems to.
And sometimes you can have, and Paul, you've had the exact same experience, and Emily too. When I would be drafting decisions, I'd get individual comments from planning board members in my old life to then pull together into a final document. Sometimes things conflicted. I'd call them out saying, here were two different things. And, then that staff's job to sort of pull things together, and where there is some uncertainty or some conflict between what two people are saying, to highlight that for the group to say. I love track changes. I don't know if CMRPC has the same perspective. I don't make a change to a document without doing it in track changes, so we can all see the evolution of a document, so that you don't then question, well, how did that question change? Because for us then to go through and review every comment that was received in advance and then through the meeting, we probably would expire the amount of time that Zoom has for a meeting.
So in short, that's okay. To, bring, just as long as it's not making decisions, not deliberations. It's just, so I just, because I wasn't, when you asked the question, I wasn't quite sure how that.
It has always been my understanding that you can share your opinion with the group, but nobody within the group can kind of second that opinion.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be drawing conclusions, but you certainly can share an opinion.
You can't deliberate on it.
Right.
Yes.
Right. That's kind of been, but again, we're all here. We all have committee experience. If somebody feels that somebody is operating outside of the lines, Gene, if you have a problem, Alan, if you have a problem, whomever, certainly, call up that member and we'll get it rectified.
What I usually do for conservation is, if there's something that I need to send to everyone, I just write for discussion at the next meeting, or for your review only.
All right, so I think we're good with that. I think the next, Emily, you were talking about a clerk's position, and what would the role of that person be fulfilling?
Yeah, so the clerk would have to write up meeting minutes and send it to the group, ideally as soon as possible. It sounds like we're meeting like monthly, so maybe 2 weeks before the next meeting, so people have enough time to review the minutes. That's the major responsibility of a clerk.
Okay. All right. Is there anyone that would be interested in serving in that role?
Camera just focused in on you, Steve.
It looks like you're doing it right now.
Pointed question, right?
That's why everyone fights over chair.
Yeah.
Can you be a clerk and the co-chair?
Christine, there's a nomination for your cat.
Well, he's at every meeting. He doesn't write well.
All right. So how do we proceed? No one is interested. Anybody want to make a motion and nominate anyone?
Not gonna make it. I mean, is it possible to have the video serve as the minutes? Is that legal?
I'm not sure. Joe or Paul, do you know?
Not really, because approved minutes need to be filed with the town clerk. So unless we're filing USB sticks and taking a vote to approve, I'd sort of, and this is where Paul and CMRPC, Emily can both shoot me. I'm glad I'm not here in person. If we rotated so that just if it ends up being once a month, I'll take this month. If then someone can take the next. We have the transcript, which can be really messy sometimes. But realistically, we're not doing decisions. This isn't transcription. A lot of these things are not specific actions. They're dialogue that we're just merely summarizing. We can probably find a way to do it because otherwise we'll be discussing for the next hour who's going to be clerk.
How do you get a copy of the transcripts?
Emily will get it once she stops the recording.
And then can she forward it to people?
Yes.
Because if she could forward it to me, I would work on it. But
Oh, then I rescind everything that I just said.
But it would be hard for you to write it all down. But if I can have a copy of the transcript, I would do it.
I nominate Chris Scott.
I second.
Jump on the opportunity.
Chris, did you say that you would be interested in doing it if you could get access to the video? Is that what you said?
Yes, access to the transcript. So that way I can use that to write the minutes.
Okay. All right. So we have a nomination and we have a second. Any other nominations? Seeing none. We'll take a vote. So the nomination is for Christine Scott as clerk.
Kathy Robertson, aye.
Ellen,
Laura,
Steve Kelly and I.
Chris Scott, aye.
Aye.
Jane is an aye, and Jean.
Gene, you know, what we able to, I think, rather than just as a point of order, Steve, when we're doing the roll call votes, why don't you just call us out individually and get our vote rather than everybody trying to jump in and, you know, make.
That's what I was trying to do, Jean. I was trying to go in the same order. It's just I
okay.
looked over at Jane and she voted. And the last time I said Jane voted in your stead. So I'm trying to go in the same order and hopefully we'll get pretty smooth in this.
Okay.
In fact, in the future, I'll do Jean first and Jane last. How about that?
That's perfect.
All right. Well, in any event, motion carries unanimously. All right, Emily, we are back to you.
All right. Congratulations, new officers. I will help you make your lives easier for this. Let's see. All right, moving forward. We're gonna, it's thundering out. Sorry.
Oh, wow.
Loud. Oh, jeez. We're gonna review the draft of the survey. So I did get some comments from thinking the best way to do this is I will share my screen and then we can go like question by question. How does that sound to everyone?
Hey, Emily, quick question. Are you in Worcester?
I am, yeah.
Did you hear that big clap just now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Big storm's coming your way up, then here you go.
I was trying to shut my window, but it's stuck, so I
Oh, no.
all right, so I'm gonna share my screen. All right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Then, okay, so I had a, sorry, this is tricky. I also had these comments from Kathy, which were super helpful. So I might have to go back and forth between those, unless Kathy, you have your comments printed out or something that you could refer to. Otherwise, I'll just toggle between the two.
Yeah, I have them I can refer to. I have
Okay.
them handwritten. I didn't print that out, but that's okay.
Okay.
It just in general, just general thought is, I thought that the survey as written was too long and it was too much in the weeds. And I tended to think that people, and it didn't really focus solely on what we're asking people to do. So I tended to think that that might limit the responses that we get to it. And these were just, as I said in my note, these are just my thoughts. So they're nothing that, it's just how I think. Like in the first paragraph, this is your opportunity to tell us about your experience living in Upton. I changed that to your ideas for housing development in Upton, because that's really what we ask questions about their experience, what they like about the town later on. But this survey I thought was about housing needs, not learn about people's experiences. Again, I think there's too many words in general, and I was just looking at the bigger, pieces of it. At the end of that first page, what is meant by affordable housing, I would get rid of the second paragraph, or change it. I recommended a change that would read, because people aren't gonna understand that. They're not gonna wanna understand AMI calculated by HUD. That's gonna be when people just decide they're not gonna go ahead and fill it out. So I changed that to, and I sort of, because I remember the questions that were asked me last year or earlier this year with the parcel that we were working on. So I changed the language to the state defines affordable housing as units with deed restrictions, ensuring they will remain affordable for decades or in perpetuity. Each community has an obligation to ensure that 10% of its housing meet the state definition of affordable. Housing that is affordable to low, mid, or moderate income residents does not meet the state definition unless it has the deed restriction. Because people tend to think affordable housing is affordable housing. And so I sort of changed it to that, getting rid of the buzzwords, getting rid of the numbers, and just basically clarifying the difference between affordable and affordable is it's the deed restriction. And so that was my thought on the first page. And do you want me to just go over these, or do you want me to?
Why don't we talk about that first page?
Yeah.
And then we'll go to second, we can move on to the second page and then ultimately the questions. Is there anybody that thought that was too wordy? As far as what you saw in the rough draft, was there anybody that thought that was too wordy?
I'll answer. Personally, I thought the whole thing was too long. I don't think we're going to get responses to this. I think people are going to look at it. They're going to get 2 pages in and they're going to say, well, that's what I would have done, because I don't like questionnaires to begin with. But no, I didn't. If what we're trying to do is meet the state's requirement, nobody understands affordable. Right now, the average house in Upton lists at 1.2 million. The cheapest house in Upton is just under 1,000 square feet for $500,000. So when you say quote unquote affordable in Upton, it's a misnomer. That's as of today. So, but I honestly think the whole document is too cumbersome.
Okay.
I tried to take it.
Okay, good. Sorry.
I tried to take it, but it got me into a virus. So I did not take it.
Oh no.
Yeah. So that was like a 4-day
Uh-oh.
thing. So I'm not sure where it came from, but that was the only thing I clicked on.
Huh.
So Christine, you weren't able to open the document at all?
No,
In fact, computer.
no,
Okay,
because when I clicked on it, I got a virus that affected my computer.
okay. I think Jean, you were next.
Yeah, the only comment that I have is, while I understand the desire for brevity in these things, one of the primary roles I think of our committee and in general the other committees in town is to educate people about what is affordable housing and what isn't. I agree that the cumbersome terminology around AMI, HUD, and all of those things, those are will turn people off right away. But I think that using numerical values is very effective, and saying that that 80% of the median income is not that cumbersome, and 80% of median income in Upton is pretty high. So the issue that we always have, or a lot of times we have with affordable housing, is a perception of low quality, undesirable. A lot of negative connotations go with that. So the moment we can pin a number, say, basically 98, if you make $98,000 in Upton, you qualify for affordable housing, or whatever the number is. So in this case, 79,000. That's, I think, pretty important for people to understand, in terms of not trying to galvanize people again, to incent people against affordable housing, but to get them to understand what it is that we're talking about. And simple numerical values at the very beginning of a survey like this is very helpful for people, I think, to understand what we're really talking about, what we need to do. So I agree that editing is really important, to try and be as brief as possible and as effective as possible in the questioning, so that we don't bore people. Although I just think it's critical, that on critical issues like this one, we need to have that early on in the survey so that people understand what it's about.
Jean, I agree with you, and I was sort of looking at a way to toggle to let people know what affordable housing is. The way you worded it, I thought was really good. And maybe something else that we can consider is on page 8 of this document, they have notes on affordable housing. And so we could frame it to what affordable housing is in Upton. And I think the numbers are good, but just put a link to say, for more information, go to this page. So
Right.
just
Yeah, if I can just chime in for a moment. That highlighted paragraph was my favorite paragraph in the survey. I look at that's definition. Again, I'm a numbers guy, so I find that very interesting. Gene, I agree 100%. I think that's got to be first and foremost. You could even move that up a little bit in the presentation. I mean, I think it's important to define what those numbers are. Laura raises a great point as far as the actual cost of homes in town, but affordable, you have to balance that with the actual dollar value of what that income level is. So I would not want to eliminate that paragraph. I can see some areas where we might be able to shorten the presentation and make it more brief. But however, I don't think that particular paragraph is one that we should, eliminate.
Yeah, and maybe it's just as simple as saying, affordable housing in Upton, and a couple of bullet points, and a couple of bullet points, and then similarly on the next paragraph, all responses to the survey will be completely anonymous. Try and again lean towards brevity, but without foregoing some of the critical aspects of what we're trying to communicate. We want people to respond to it. We want to understand what they're responding to and what the goal here is. I think if there's anything that I think that needs to be early on in the survey is, what are we trying to accomplish? A survey for the sake of a survey, you're right, people are turning off. But if you want to look at this and say this is, about the future of housing, and the whole survey is just the future of housing, titled The Future of Housing in Upton, I think you get people to be engaged early on. Everybody has an opinion about it. Go to Rushford's, go to any place in town, for a conversation. This is one of the things that, people are talking about fairly frequently.
I think that's a great point, Gene, and I like the bullet points. I think that was my issue with it. In a former life, I was a court stenographer. Nobody reads. People actually listen to less than 30% of what is actually said. When they read even less. So these long paragraphs, two pages of paragraphs, none of it's going to sink in. So I like Steve's numbers because that's important. And I do think if we can pare this down to bullet points as much as possible, we'll get a better response for our questions.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that, again, people think that affordable housing is affordable housing. So people look at like downtown Upton and say there's lots of affordable housing in Upton because a lot of the places down, towards the center are affordable, but they're not affordable. So that's, it's also good to get that because people don't understand that.
Right.
They think so it might be good to add a bullet point that adds to the length, but I think this is an area that I've seen that people really don't understand.
Now, because they don't realize that Upton's average median income is sky high.
Right.
So anyone who's been here, who's over 75 and has been here for a while and had an average job that we all had growing up, a teacher, a fireman, a factory worker, they don't even know what their houses are worth, never mind the definition of affordable.
Or the average salary for a teacher about to retire with a pension of over 100,000 a year.
Exactly.
So again, the way you were just expressing that, I thought you meant it was going to be, some 5-figure amount. It isn't. Teaching is actually a well-paid position, as you might know. So
I agree, it is now, but it wasn't in the 70s. So what my point was, the people who are in their senior, and that's me, 60, 70 years old, don't realize how much incomes have skyrocketed. They don't realize how much property values have skyrocketed.
So I'm a litigation attorney, and I think I have a judge's or jury's attention for about 20-25 seconds before they turn me out. So I think somebody reading this is going to, I think you're right, you need to identify very quickly as you can before they say, the hell with it, and don't do it. A collateral question, how are you going to get this to the community? There's not going to be a town crier anymore. There might be something else, but there's not going to be a town crier. It's gone. So we haven't been, for example, I guess at some point, if you want to mail this to the community, we would ask the selectmen maybe from their own fund to fund it so that it could be done. But I'm just curious, Steve, do you have any idea maybe how you and your brethren are looking for us to communicate this to the community? Because one other thing, just generally, whoever is responsible for, used to be Town TV, Channel 13, for the life of me, my wife and I can't find how to watch these meetings and such. The Upton Men's Club donated that sign entity out there. When the past clerk was here at the beginning, not towards the end, she used to post things on it. Do you still have the alphabet and numbers? For example, this would be very interesting, I think, to the community if it was being videoed or actually shown to the community, or if they knew about the Zoom information. I mean, you want to get it out to the community, right? Why not post what these meetings are so they can watch us?
I've got to tell you, in theory, all of these are great points and certainly they're goals, something that we want to achieve. However, when I was first elected to the board, we thought we're going to engage people. We're going to, we're going to put more information out there. Our meetings are available via a link on the website. As right now, anybody should be able to log in to this meeting and listen in. But I would have things that I would be questioned about a board of selectmen meeting. I would go on the website, I would find the meeting. It would ultimately be a YouTube link, and there'd be 8 views. And this would be a week later. So I'd say to myself, it's very important to me to get the information to the people, but it's not always very important that the people are actually going to
If it was
see
on
it.
TV, I suggest to you, you'd have a greater audience than people attending through a computer. So again, but can you tell me
You
what
may be
TV
right,
station?
but you may be wrong.
What channel? What channel? If I want to watch things,
So-
there is no.
I don't know that. I don't have that answer.
If I may interrupt, so what I would recommend, because Paul and I both have experience being able to relay information out to the public, we can come up with essentially a public engagement plan. We don't have to email the survey, but postcards going to people are going to be pretty easy to do. We can come up with a plan. Many of the things, Alan, that you identified, I've started to look at myself, since we don't use TV to the extent that I'm used to in other towns that I've worked in. But unfortunately for this project, we won't be able to solve that in the next week for the survey. I'd recommend Paul and myself work to identify how we can get this out. What we're able to do to get visibility. And we can report back to not only the individual boards, Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, Affordable Housing Trust, since we may meet with those boards to give updates sooner than we have our next meeting. But then we can, when we have our next HPP meeting, we can sort of go over those engagement aspects of how we can get participation out. The other thing is I agree with everyone that the narrative at the beginning should be shortened. Just to throw out, people may be able to understand household income for 4, but we should also tie it to what that means for what the price of a house is. And again, those can be bullet points, and really sort of shorten that period up. I think there's broad consensus in that. As far as the actual questions, there's really only 15 substantive questions, and they're not very long. They're not asking to be filled out. It's just either pick your top or list as many. I think it's hitting the bare minimum as far as what we need to collect. So I'd recommend just everyone concentrating on the narrative, the intro, to frame the reason why we're doing this. But I don't know to what extent really paring back the number of questions, because the last 5 are all demographic questions. 15 questions for what we're doing isn't all that much.
You could be right, Joe. You could be, if we can get these first couple of pages more into bullet points and more succinct, then I think people would probably start going through the survey, either doing it all or picking some or none. But I think it's very important. We really need to pare the beginning of this down, because I think we're going to lose them. I'm an info geek and you lost me.
Just another, there were some suggestions I have in language, but just for the group. Question 13, really, some questions were confusing to me. But question 13, do we need it? Because I think it raises more questions about, this seems to be a topic for when we have the community, when we have the public input session, like later on, and we can explain what the CPA is, and how it works and how much money is, because that just opens so many questions. And so we're asking a lot of people who don't know about the affordable housing component of the Community Preservation Fund. We're asking how it should be spent. They don't know how much money is there. They don't know what the limitations are. They don't know how it, I just thought that it might be a good idea just to take 13 out.
I think that's a great comment by you. I would agree with you.
So skipping ahead now to question 13, are there other people, Jean, Jane, or Christine?
Just a moment, Steve, it just, when we're running in.
I was just asking for your opinion, not for a vote. I was just
No, I know
asking,
that.
what are your thoughts on striking that?
I know that. Just when we're running in hybrid, just want to make a comment. When we're running in hybrid, there people raise their hands, lots of times, virtually, and aren't being seen. And so it's important that people get a chance that are remote, get a chance to comment without interrupting. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Nobody's comfortable necessarily interrupting. So we just have to make sure that we're recognizing people that want to make a comment that are raising their hand virtually in our meeting. There's been a couple of those that have been done, and we just kind of all strong personalities here with good opinions, I think, but we just have to be respectful of people that want to chime in. Okay.
I apologize for that. It's a little tricky for me to do both screen sharing and note taking and facilitating. So maybe Gabe or somebody could
help
out with that.
Yeah, sorry. I will I can take a look. I'll keep an eye on the hand raises.
Okay.
Apologies.
So next I think it was Paul had his hand raised.
Yeah, I had my hand up about 10 minutes ago. I think the point is passed, but thank you, Gene, for the point.
Yeah, and the other thing, Gene, is with the screen share, we can't actually see you at all times, just so you know.
Right, and that's why I'm making the comment. I understand it's really complicated to try and run these meetings when it's hybrid. I don't know what people are seeing on the other side of the screen, so it's just erring on the side of caution, just making sure that we're each getting a chance to be heard without feeling like we're competing to be heard. You know what I mean?
So this might be helpful for future meetings, but I had the option off too, which is why I didn't see anyone had their hand raised. If you go, it should be on your situation, but if you go to the top right corner, there's a view button, and that'll let you put you can make it side-by-side gallery when we're in screen share, and that'll give you a column with all the people with their cameras on, and if people raise their hand, it should pop up there. So if people want to remember to switch to that gallery view when we're in screen share, that'll probably help us be aware of what's going on both ends.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted. I want to.
No, it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to set that precedent at these early meetings. So I've taken a bunch of notes here. Thank you everyone for your comments so far. What I'm getting is reduce the unnecessary I use a lot of planner jargon. And that's something I'm personally working on, like trying to use, more layman's terms when explaining these things, because it can be very complicated, but we do want to have that important text in there. And I'll try to make that as clear as possible, maybe more bullet points. I'm thinking of adding more like links to websites that would explain it more. So if someone is interested and wants to read more about this topic, they can click the link and read to their heart's desire, but really just having the meat of what we need for this survey in that introduction page. Do we want to go back to the beginning of the survey and just kind of go through the questions?
Emily, I just thought while we were on, I didn't really want to skip all the way forward to question 13.
Yeah.
But it's a good idea, and others have expressed that they're in agreement with 13. So while we have everybody focused on question 13, is there anything compelling there, Joseph, from your standpoint, Paul, or Emily, is there anything that's absolutely imperative that this question stays on here? Or if there are a majority of members on the board that would like to strike the question, this may be a good time to just finish that thought. And I have a few comments on some of the other questions, but we can at least finish up on question 13.
Yeah, this question is really one that I just threw in there, just because you do have these funds available to directly support affordable housing initiatives. So I thought this would be a good way to get on paper what people would prefer to see those dollars used towards. But Kathy does bring up good points about not having the actual, numbers of how much is in the fund and what else it goes towards. I had included a link in there. We could include more information in the question. It's definitely not a question that's necessary for the purpose of a housing production plan getting approved by DHCD. I just thought this was a good opportunity to hear from people about what they'd like to see their town funds used towards. So just let me know if you'd like me to take it out or not.
This is Chris. I think it's important to have it in there because people have some people have complained about the CPC funding and not realizing what it can be used for. And we have not successfully used anything for affordable housing. And I've been on the commission, the CPC for 9 years.
Eugene has his hand raised.
I just
Go
want
ahead.
I think that we can, again, towards brevity, any of the votes for CPA funds are town meeting votes eventually. I do think the most important and salient point that we're trying to make is, do you know that CPA funds can be used to create affordable housing in town, number one. I think we need to know that you have an understanding that people know that. And number two, are you in favor of using CPA funds for enhancing or promoting affordable housing in town? Those are the two questions that are most important. I think from the point of view of the governing body, the selectmen need to know, how that's going to occur. When a vote comes to the town meeting, how we use it will be determined by the warrant. So I don't think we need to go into all of the nuances of this question, just making the point that, CPC funds can be used for this purpose. And then that you make sure people understand that. And number two, making sure that they're in favor of that.
Gene, that's a great point. And I think that would be good for a fact sheet, so people can realize that CPC funding can be used for this reason. And not really a question, but a fact sheet.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, not to jump in, but I think the question is valuable because it kind of condenses sort of from the taker, like what their priorities are when it comes to housing in an interesting way. And I think, putting in the body of the question, CPA, this is one of the main things it's used for. It's a really good educational opportunity because people might not even know it's happening. Obviously, I know it's controversial, but some people taking it might not know about it. And maybe explaining that the money is there because I think people are scared of the idea of a tax, but the town already has the money, so
And I guess I'll just weigh in and say, if we are trying to shorten up the document, this would be a question that I would be in favor of striking. As two of my colleagues have already mentioned, Laura, I'm not sure if you commented on this. Are you in favor of keeping this question or deleting this question?
I really like Jean's opinion right down to the 2 bullet points. Do you know that CPC can be used for this, and would you be interested in that? Because I think if we give them too many nuances, like Jean says, it's all goes on to the warrant, and you're going to have people standing up saying, well, I read a document and it said we could do X, and someone else is going to say it said we could do Y. So, unfortunately, when you deal with the general public, you really need to keep it short and simple.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've got the link. They could, if they wanted to learn more, they could click on the link. So I really like Jean's pared down. This is it. This is what it can be used for. And it could be a simple, were you aware that these funds are available and can be used for that? Yes or no?
Do you want to strike the question and put an informative paragraph or 2 bullet points?
2 bullet points and a link.
And the link, yes, that this is what they, are you aware of that CPC? I'm gonna butcher what you said.
Yeah, Jean can say it again.
If Jean, go back to the tape, see what Jean said, the 2 bullet points and with a yes or no.
But you want to add that at the top level?
No, I think it can remain as a question 13, but I'm very pared down question 13
Strike what's here and just add what Laura
Okay.
talked about.
with the link.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that makes sense to all of us then?
Steve, should we switch to galley view, one to the right, because we only see 3 people. So see the blue highlight above the picture of us? If you click to the multiple squares, I think we might be able to see everyone.
This one here?
I tried.
Well, I think when she shares the screen, you're going to lose. You're not going to have that ability.
There's a shot of that.
I just clicked it. It's not going to do anything with screen share. That works when there's no screen share.
Okay.
There's an arrow at the bottom of the list of people that you can push, and then everyone else will show up.
Right, but we have to scroll up and down, Christine, as we're
Right.
just sitting, but we only see 3 people.
If you
Oh.
click on participants, does it show if people's hands are up? And it doesn't take up,
I don't know.
that's what I always do when I'm running with it.
That's not, that side cursor's not working, but I don't want to lose what we have.
Yeah, exactly.
What we have is better than nothing.
So Trevor can tell us,
Okay, so-
Dave can tell us.
So we've got some ideas with 13. Emily, would you like to go back and go through the questions one at a time, or? I think we're
Yeah.
running kind of long here, so we're gonna have to kind of be a little more
Yes.
prudent with how we discuss these.
Okay. So the first section, yeah, so we started with getting a sense of people's current residence. Why did they decide to live in town? Do they plan to live in town as they age? If they don't, or if they do, will they be able to afford their current home? And if they want to move out of their community, what would drive their decision? How important is it? We could potentially get rid of number 4, though I do like to use that.
I think that's important.
That's an
I
important
think it's an
one.
easy question.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's important.
Yeah, I think that's good.
You know, I usually don't do too much with the data that we get from question 1, but it is nice to kind of have like ease into the survey with that question. Okay, so why are you here? But in terms of the housing production plan, I usually don't use a lot of the data from this question. It's more about the future, not the past, if that makes sense.
As a realtor, I find number 1 interesting because I think I know what the answer is, so I'd be curious. Most people move here for the schools and come every June, we have a mass exodus.
Wow.
Once the last kid's out of school, away they go.
Wow.
That to me would be an interesting question.
And I also think we need to know why people decide to reside in Upton in order to help determine, figuring out what we need to preserve. Like if people are here for, natural beauty or we need to look at the different things to focus on when we're looking at the new neighborhoods, whatever. So.
Okay, it sounds like we're in favor of
Yep.
keeping that question. So first page in general looks good to folks?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So for the group, the one thing in this sort of first section I was questioning was, and Emily, can you scroll back? I think it was number 3. So see how it says if you answered yes, if you plan on staying in your current house until you retire. The one thing that's missing would be that if you answered no, that you're not going to plan on staying in your house when you go into retirement, but do you plan to stay in Upton? That's because you could have people that are in a 5-bedroom colonial that want to downsize, but they want to stay in Upton. That's the one thing I didn't quite feel was captured to really look at the variety of housing options.
And Joe, I think that's valid because that's what I hear. I want to stay in town, but there's nothing on one level that meets my aging needs. And like Kathy said, her neighbors in the 1700 house. Some of these houses are not set up to age well.
Could we add in another question that would say if your answer was no, but you want to stay in Upton, what would your plans be? What housing plans would you have?
Yeah, I can add another one in. How do folks feel about that?
The only problem with that question is a narrative answer. I think the question is a good one, Chris, but it's difficult for us. It's going to be difficult for us to process narrative answers. It's difficult for people to answer a narrative answer, to create a narrative. So
is there a way to ask and say, what's the determining factor? If there were smaller, more affordable housing, would that make you stay? Put it in a positive spin?
Yeah, it'd be just like what we're doing for question 4 or 5, giving some pre-populated options.
Agreed.
Or if you took question 3, and regardless of how you answered it, the 4th dot is NA, maybe there you would put that idea where I would stay in town if I could downsize.
Yeah,
that's excellent.
Yeah.
That's a great idea, but could we also kind of combine what we're talking about with number 5 somehow? Because number 5 says if you were to consider moving out of your community, which would drive your decision to move. And I think we're going to find out that, the people in the 5-bedroom colonials, or if something happens medically and they can no longer do stairs, they need wider doorways, they need 1 floor living. Maybe we could kind of roll it all into one there without adding a question, because they're pretty simple. Number 5 is pretty similar to what we're trying to, why would you not stay?
Emily, could you wordsmith this and then send it out to the group, or is this something we should talk about now, real time, the exact language?
Yeah, it just depends on our timeline of meetings and when we want to get this out. So I could definitely wordsmith this and send it out. I just don't want to wait another month maybe to get it out. If we could maybe have another meeting in 2 or 3 weeks, just so we can. Yeah, just so we can really finalize this and get it out.
Yeah, I think it's important enough to do that.
Maybe do a meeting 2.5 weeks or something.
Or 2 weeks, or we could do it real time. That I just threw out an idea. We could do it now, but I think it's going to take time.
But if we have the idea of what we'd like added to those 2 questions, we would just have to trust that Emily and Joe can work and get those. Get those kind of phrased to where they can capture the information they need, but we're happy with what we're presenting to the taxpayers.
Great. Yeah, I mean, you could take a vote at the end of this meeting saying that you would approve the survey given the edits that myself and Joe and Paul make.
I think for number 5, if we add another selection to be, I would look for a low 1-level house, that would help me stay. With even the new houses that are built are all 2-level. So the town needs to have more 1-level houses.
Yeah, because I was just thinking you could almost have a 5A that asks, would you prefer to stay in Upton prior to moving to another community? And if you were to move your current house, what are those factors that would drive your decision? You can sort of capture someone's preference for staying in town. And then all those other reasons are all valid for why they would also move out or stay in town.
I agree, and I'd be happy, deferring to, you guys know what we want, maybe
Yes, I mean, so ultimately, if we're comfortable deferring to Paul, Joe, and Emily to just clean up those two questions, we've got a pretty good,
So far.
so those two, only
Yep.
those two. But so far, we have a pretty good dialogue as far as what people are looking to kind of fine tune on those questions. So if we're good with that, we can move on.
I think so.
Okay.
All right, thanks everyone. Let's see.
Dean and Jane, I cannot see you, so if you have a comment you want to make, please let us know.
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
All right, the next set of questions is on housing affordability. These are really important, but if they can be condensed or anyone doesn't make sense, yeah, we can discuss it. So first one asked about current affordability. Are you currently able to afford your home? The second one here, number 7, asked about, this is like the federal kind of standard metric that's used to determine affordability. I can see how maybe this would be confusing. So it's asking, is more than 30% of your monthly income dedicated to paying for housing? So according to, I guess, HUD and DHCD, if you're dedicating more than 30% of your income each month towards housing costs, then you're considered cost burdened. So ideally, we want people to be paying less than 30%. So this is kind of a good way to get a sense of who in opt-in is cost burdened. And that's something that I incorporate into the plan.
Do we want to put net income?
You realize this is probably the worst time to send out this part of the
Yes.
survey. Electricity is gonna go up 60%.
Yep.
Gas, again, natural gas is gonna
Right.
go up. People are gonna be blown away in about 2 months what
Right.
it costs to meet their necessities.
By home heating oil?
So
Yes.
And not only that, but I know for mortgages, when they look at your loan to value, it's a 40% of your income and it's gross income, Jane. I know you said
Oh.
net. They look at 40%. So anybody who just bought a house is gonna say, well, more than 30%, yes, because my mortgage guy told me I can only go 40% LTV, and so I guess
Because I've always read the guidelines being 25 to 30% of your net income is all that should be going towards housing, ideally.
why are we asking respectfully some of these questions? I mean, the idea is to, I thought, look at what the community owns and come up with proposed affordable housing projects. So I'm not quite sure why, for example, if there's an emergency, do you have $400, in your bureau or something? I'm not sure what the relevance of that is really to what I understood the purpose of this committee was.
I don't have the answer to that, but I'm thinking that there's obviously some other data that they're looking to gather. Again, as she said, being financially burdened maybe is an indicator to how healthy your community is. I'm not really sure.
and you have to realize how rich Upton is.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're looking at here, it's a housing production plan, not an affordable housing production plan. And I think that we're looking at what type of housing does Upton need. And if people, if 50% of people's monthly income is going towards paying housing, that I think is a strong indicator that housing is too expensive. And we need more, not affordable housing, but affordable housing. And so I think, I'm very comfortable. I have issues with other questions, but I personally was very comfortable with these. I did think question 8 was a little bit silly, but I didn't recommend striking it. But I thought that, for Upton, there's very few people, it just didn't seem appropriate.
Well, I would only say that I had made notes on 2 questions. But number 8 was one of the questions where 400 is just too low of a threshold.
Yeah.
I think we're trying to kind of guess, again, I agree, Alan, that it's a little off base, but I think we're trying to get an idea of, how financially healthy is the community with respect to housing. But I think that 400 should be a much larger number, right? 400 is not going to be a bump in the road for most people.
Right.
If that was 1,500,
Yeah.
you know, or
Like
whatever
a
that
tree
number
fell on
is.
your wall right after you built your house, yeah.
Yeah, or somebody needs a heating system or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that, something
yeah.
that's really going to
Yeah.
shake them up. So I guess, you
We
know,
just generalize it and make it an unexpected, or, you know, significant unexpected expense or something instead of the 400 amount, because that is silly.
I think having numbers is important. I think people can resonate to say a significant expense, everyone will have their own definition. I think if you say 1,500, I think there's universal, that if that's significant, if you're rich, you can afford it. For moderate income, it's a challenge.
right. Or as Alan said, is this a question, is this another opportunity to maybe strike the question? Or as you had insinuated, you didn't really come and say it, but
I honestly, I would agree with Alan and strike the question. I think it's gonna be insulting to some people.
Yeah.
And I think it's gonna be very off-putting, even by the 400.
So I can tell you right now, because I do divorces at this time too, you'd be surprised how many people live paycheck to paycheck, how many people have very little, if any, equity in their home and are living off of credit cards. Not just at Upton. So, but again, I guess if we got that information, Emily, what does that tell us then? That are we looking then for a certain type of project for public housing that's going to be voted on by the community theoretically, as opposed to some other? Is that the purpose of that question?
And I'm just Eugene has his hand up, so I'm going to let Emily go, and then if Eugene, if you want to ask a question or whatever.
Yeah, so just quickly, so the idea of this section is to, get a sense of, people's ability to pay for housing. And that isn't necessarily answered with one question, with what is your monthly income? What is your household income? So that's the reason we asked a few questions here. To your point, Alan, because some projects could be targeted towards, so basically HUD sets up housing projects for low income, which is 80% less of the area median income, very low income, which is housing targeted for people earning 50% or less of the area median income, and extremely low income, which is, I believe, for 30%, people earning 30% or less of the area median income. So if we were to get a lot of people who kind of fit into that very low income bracket or extremely low income bracket, that could be one outcome of this survey. But really, it's just to get a sense of, are people struggling to pay for housing? And we kind of need to ask a few different questions to really get to that. And then, Jean, do you want to go ahead?
I guess a couple of follow-ups to Alan's comment. One of the things in many of these surveys and these kind of things that we're doing in town and in various committees is trying to gather information that unlocks, a potential source of funding, either through DHCD or federal programs or whatever. So I would ask, Joe and Paul, who are the ones keeping their eyes on grants opportunities, are any of these questions key questions for us to answer in terms of applying for assistance, either from a state or federal program? And I think that, that's a good lens for us to look at some of this information gathering. Is it useful in another place for another purpose? So that's one element of it. The other thing I think is, I agree that sometimes these questions can be insulting so in another way to ask this is, that would be important for us as people that are consistently volunteering for committees is, what are the biggest challenges in town? And rather than into affordability or staying in place, and rather than saying, what is it, $400, is what is the biggest issue that you have with affordability? A single question. Is it, taxes? Is it overall maintenance to your home? What is it, Because from the selectman's perspective, Steve, you've often been coming forward at town meeting talking about the tax burden, the residential tax burden. And I hear that a lot from other people in town. So I think we do want to know, we do want to know the kind of the affordability issue, but I think many of these questions, we need to target them to get information that we want as, you know, volunteers that have an interest in seeing a better community and how we move the town forward long term. So I just want to offer that up as, you know, as a lens as when we're looking at these things. But I do want to ask Paul and Joe about, you know, the unlocking potential funding sources and what's important for us to focus on in a survey like this.
I'll jump in on that if it's okay. I mean, specifically, for the data, as Emily outlined, is taken from various state and federal guidelines, but just the practice, the product of having the housing production plan at the end of this, that will be the prerequisite, if you will, for opening up other grant opportunities. Not so much whether we get a good answer to question 7 or 8 or whatever. Having gone through this process before, at this stage, I don't think we're at a recommendation or program proposal stage. So I think that question will be relevant when we get there in our recommendations, which things are geared towards actual real life programs. But I think at this stage, I don't think there's a specific data point that's gonna, I'm not gonna write, I can't foresee an application next year where I said, oh, the survey we did back in October, 72% said they wanted this. Yeah, that might be interesting color, but it's not going to make or break any grant application. I don't know if that answers your question, Gene.
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
My response to that is, kind of along the lines of what Alan said, is why do we need to ask it? If we can shorten it up, if these are unnecessary questions for us to get them, because you were very concise in saying that what gets us to the point where we unlock funding is having a housing production plan.
Right. But if I could counter as well, sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm not speaking for Emily or just my own perspective on this, is the part of what we're trying to get at with this type of question is, who's going to take the survey? That's a whole nother agenda item. But who's going to take it? Honestly, we don't have a lot of diversity in terms of that in Upton. We do have certainly a fair amount of rental property, but I would say largely as home ownership. So in a more, housing diverse community, splitting the hairs of who's renting, who's, that kind of thing might give us more information. I think what we're trying to get at here is trying to get as much information about who lives here now. And are these people who we talked about before, who it's, high income, high home value, or are there people, whether they be seniors or younger professionals or just local folks who never moved out of town, can they afford to stay here? Or if they had to sell their current home, could they actually buy a home in Upton, given their life stage? That said, this question doesn't get us there, but I think that was part of the idea of the question. If someone is more, if someone's living check to check, we don't necessarily, I'm not speaking for the committee, but it probably isn't considered desirable to have a lot of high turnover of tenants on a month-to-month basis or on a regular basis. You'd want people who can be here longer term to be part of the community, whether they're renters or homeowners. So that's my thought on part of why we're trying to ask this question without asking, hey, are you rich or poor? That's that's hard to ask, obviously.
Well, you asked it at the end when you asked income levels.
Well, that's statistically, and now that's statistical analysis, Kathy. There's lots of ways to ask these questions, but I agree we want to make it as palatable as possible for people taking it.
Okay. So we have beat up this page pretty good here. Are we sticking with these questions? Do you want to move forward and look at the next batch of questions? Are we eliminating any one of them? Are we changing that $400 threshold? What is the consensus at this point?
For the state entity that created this, I'm curious, City of Newton has done, I believe, some affordable housing recently after several years of community fighting. I think I was driving through Canton. It looked like there was some done there also. Do these communities that maybe aspires to be, is this what is in theirs that they send to their community before they move forward?
Just,
These questions?
can I just make a
Well,
point?
is there an answer?
Just a question.
Well,
This
can we
is-
get
this
an answer to his question first, and then you can answer your question? Ask your question after.
Okay.
Just because we're gonna get into A, B, and C, he's kind of got a
Yeah, okay.
2-point question.
No, for sure.
Emily, Paul, Gabe, can anybody answer Alan's question? John, stand up.
Go
I'll
ahead.
jump in on that. I'm sorry. CMRPC serves Central Mass, so those communities would not have been serviced by CMRPC. But I did this exercise in Boylston last year, and the survey format in substance was similar.
And Joe has his hand up as well.
I was going to say, I've done housing plans, Wayland, West, and Stoughton. This is pretty run of the mill.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
And just a clarification.
Yep.
This is not for affordable housing. This is for housing production in general. And I think that's why we're trying to get who we need to produce housing for. So when Newton's talking about building affordable housing, you also come up with an affordable housing plan, which is an offshoot of the housing production plan. So there's like several unfortunate, not really several steps, but this is just the focus on this is what type of housing does Upton need and what do we need to get there? And that's why it keeps coming up because the focus seems to be really on affordable housing, and that's not what the focus this should really be. Am I correct, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, this all goes just together as just identifying metrics that are around that affordability range. What are some of the stressors that people are experiencing? And that can lead to assisting in crafting programs, whether it's for winterization or for modernization. So, I mean, it's a metric. That one goes with number 9 as well, and number 7. So it's all within trying to understand the pressures that some of those where housing reflects more of a higher percentage of their income, what sort of is a concern for them.
Did you have another comment, Alan? No. Okay.
Number 9, I did have a comment on. And it was more wordsmithing. I didn't understand it as written. And I thought that changed to something along the lines of, do you need, this is roughly written, but basically, do you need any of the following financial support or services, or what financial support and services do you need to keep or access housing? Because when it says this is just a little bit convoluted. The way I read mine was convoluted too, but most it's like, what do you need if you want to live in Upton, if you want to keep your house in Upton? Tax relief, can you go there? It was just more direct.
I think as Jean mentioned earlier, these questions are crafted so that they're easy to quantify and we don't get into narrative. So some of those answers that are up there with respect to question 9, those are maybe geared more towards renters.
Oh no, you leave the boxes, you leave the top 3. But just which of the following financial support services for housing most fit your current need? I just didn't understand that when I read it. I might have just been simple, but I didn't understand.
Okay.
It was just wordsmithing the way it was written. That's all.
Okay.
It's basically what do you need to actually help, it's like what services do you need?
Steve,
If there's no other,
can somebody tell me why legal assistance or protection from eviction is in something that we're doing for future affordable housing? Other than, again, if it's going to be a bathroom size apartment in an apartment complex, and that's really telling you, because you should also include foreclosure then. You people don't realize how many people owning homes in town barely can make their mortgage payment.
We're gonna, with the cost of fuel, we're gonna see a flood going into the winter. You're gonna see the
I
market
agree,
get flooded.
My complaints always are on really the affordability side of what we have here in town. Really, the tax bill, I feel, is what is pushing people over the edge.
People have been able to afford their taxes because interest rates have been so low and there has been no inflation. Most of the young people living in these $1 million houses have never seen inflation, and they are about to get poleaxed.
Should we add just foreclosure here? I agree with Alan.
I think we can take out legal assistance
Yeah.
and put foreclosure.
And we have Alan.
No, I don't think people,
I'm joking.
I agree with what you said.
I'm looking at that with respect to, say, the rental units that we have. Some of the affordable rentals that we have in town, again, not to mix it up with affordable, but
If we look at doing that, you're gonna refer them to the Worcester County Bar Association, people who do landlord tenant, or, the state, if anyone wants to know, at 225 Main Street, the courthouse, there are 2 attorneys who work for the trial court who help you in housing court and probate court for free. I mean, what is that doing in this? Especially when we talked about trying to slim down the questions so people don't get bored looking at it.
okay.
I agree. I think we can clarify the wording at the top. We can condense it, and I do think legal assistance or, protection from eviction. I think you're right, Alan. It's more foreclosure and often because you're not paying your bills, but.
So do we want, is that
I think we
ultimately
can-
what we're thinking?
Yeah. I think
Is use the word foreclosure as opposed to legal assistance.
I'm not sure why it's in this for affordable housing. If you get does it mean if you get a lot of positive responses as opposed to healthcare or transportation assistance, it's gonna make you think that you should have a little cubicle, like maybe they do in Japan, where you just have like a small room and we're gonna build an apartment complex that's gonna look like that, and that's where people will live? What does it mean?
And
I think you can come out entirely.
could we change transportation assistance to transportation? Because we don't have any public transportation. We don't have any way, unless you have a car.
So Emily, can we clean up that question using the ideas that we've kind of roundtabled here, and Jane, I can see Christine. Joe has his hand raised.
Yeah.
Joe, would you like to weigh in?
Just for the group's consideration, what about just striking the word legal and saying assistance or protection from eviction / foreclosure?
Yeah, that would be good, because the legal just really doesn't sit well with me.
Okay,
And we do need foreclosure. And if we could change transportation assistance to transportation.
okay, so we get rid of the word legal, we add eviction and foreclosure or foreclosure. And just transportation, not the word assistance.
And I would say to strike the support maintaining my home, lawn care, snow removal, cleaning, because those things probably don't determine where people live.
I disagree. I think we do want to have that and support and maintaining my home. I don't think we need to have what's in the parentheses. I would also offer that maybe we could strike the last 2 boxes, in terms of I don't need support services. I don't think we need to have that in there.
Mhm.
And I don't think we need to have other, and please specify. I mean, I think those, again, kind of trying to make it brief, but I do think maintaining my home is a significant issue for people, and it has to do with the age of the housing stock. As Kathy said earlier, the person that's stuck in a 1700s home, the maintenance costs are enormous. having one. I know that. So I think we do need to know that. I think that's one thing that maybe there's opportunities for, weatherization improvement, all kinds of other things like that in terms of state programs. So I think we should keep that.
Okay, and you said remove the last two, remove other, and
I don't think we want narrative responses, first
Okay.
of all. And I don't think we don't, since we're asking about a question about support services, why didn't I don't need support services? So I think it's kind of, it's just unnecessary. And again, trying to keep it as brief as possible.
Anybody have any issues with that idea of striking the last two? Support services another?
And and I would like to see the top of 9 clarified a little bit, because again, it's most fits your current need. I just,
Okay.
what do you need?
Okay. But we've
If
made
anything, yeah.
about 4 changes to the boxes, the actual answers. Obviously deleting the 2. And Emily, you've got all this, right?
yeah, I should. Me and Gabe have it down.
So
And this is recorded, so I'll just go back and watch this movie. Or this
Movie.
So sorry, Steve. The one thing about I do not need any support services. Maybe it's a wording, because then even if irregardless of someone's income, they're gonna then feel they need to choose answers, and unless you're saying having a not applicable, we need something for someone that has the means and isn't in any of these financial or support services groups to at least sort of opt out of listing any of those items. So that's why it's like, instead of do not need any support services, not applicable to my current status or something.
None of the above.
Right.
I agree with Joe.
Well, none of the
All right,
above,
so
because there could be more, but we need something for someone to say, basically, I don't need any financial or support services currently.
Okay, so why don't we leave that one and we'll just get rid of other? Okay.
Are we also taking up in the parentheses, the please select your top 3? Because I think if somebody only needs tax relief, they might feel compelled to put 3
Right.
checks.
Yeah.
So I prefer to take out the parenthetical.
Yeah.
Well, you think you're making people think that maybe they're gonna get money? You're saying financial support, rental assistance. I can't pay my rent, so I'm gonna check that. Maybe the town needs some money. Again, legal assistance, protection from eviction. Oh, they're gonna appoint a lawyer for me. If they even know what a lawyer does. I mean, again, it just seems like, I don't know. I'm glad that this is used for other communities, and evidently it must work, but this to me seems misleading isn't the right term, but just somebody filling it out is thinking maybe they're gonna get assistance, that when this is done, they're not gonna get assistance. So why put those options there? How does that tell us for housing in the community? If somebody needs rental assistance, does that mean that it's gonna be free housing to live at?
Well, you could change 9 to just say, which of the following support service, what the support service, get rid of financial up there altogether. But I actually don't think we're gonna get a flood of people that need rental assistance answering the questionnaire, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think in general, depending on how we put the questionnaire out there, I don't think we'll get that many responses anyways.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, it is misleading.
Yeah.
I
I'm
think
just gonna put my faith in Emily and Gabe and hope that they know how to interpret the information, because
I think Alan has a point. I think it's almost contrary to what we're trying to do. We're trying to develop a housing plan, and we're focusing very much on people's finances. And I don't know that Upton's the town to focus on your finance. I mean, I know a lot of it is show. The facade of the house, the cars and everything else. But I also know those people would never admit they were barely scraping by. I don't know, I think, you know, I'd be more inclined to go, you know, are you looking for rentals? Are you looking for one floor living? Are you looking for multi-units? Should we allow duplexes? Should we, you know, should we build more dense?
We have that question later in the,
That's question
later in the
11.
program, we do have that
Right,
question.
but
So,
some of these,
think-
I don't know, to me, we're focusing so much on finances.
Right.
I do understand Ellen's point, we're going down, we're taking a left. And I'm a great proponent of just plowing right through everything, so you can ignore me if you'd like. Subtlety is not my specialty.
No, we.
You know, we just see- I
crafted
understand
Question
the
9, and
picture.
we've kind of fine tuned question 9 quite a bit now. I just want to make sure we're all good with 9 and then we can move on.
Sure, let's move on. Let's try and get done. It's an hour.
Okay.
We're coming up on 2-hour mark, so I just want to keep it rolling if we can, because again, we can beat this up, we could beat it up more. Again, Emily, Joe, and Paul, there's a lot of dialogue on 9. There were some revisions there, so hopefully you'll capture the spirit of the committee. So moving on to 10, Emily. You can
Thank
take the lead.
Yeah. So this is kind of, I think, what we're talking about, what everyone would like to see out of this plan and this survey. Just minimize this. There we go. So the first question here is asking about, we're trying to get a sense of who is more in need of more diverse housing options in town. Who are we trying to attract, or who is living here who doesn't have their housing needs really met? The next question is, what types of housing would you like to see? Would you be comfortable seeing built in town in the future?
I had a comment on that section. It says, please rate the desirability. I would change that because desirability is a subjective term. It's like, what would I desire to see? Luxury, single, you know, it's like, and so I thought it might be good to say, what should our future housing priorities be, or what, something along something more, less
Don't you
subjective.
want the community to express its desirability of what they would like the community to be building, or what the person's needs might be? So,
Well, desirability, I mean, no one is going to say that, I doubt anyone's going to say that large scale apartments are desirable, because I don't think anyone, but what do you think that we need? I mean, what do you think we need?
Anybody under 30 actually wants to live in a large scale apartment. They do not want to own houses. They do not want to put roots down. They want to be mobile.
Not
It's
small
the
scale
next-
apartments, large scale, okay.
Yeah.
I have read the same thing. The
Okay.
younger
The
generation.
generation wants to move.
there should be apartments right behind Coach Road.
I agree.
That's what should be built in this community.
Okay, we're
Period.
done with the plan. We're gonna all figure.
No, seriously.
Seriously.
That's,
If we took that Mechanic Street thing and plunked it right behind Coach Road,
Be perfect.
it would be perfect. We'd meet our 40B, we'd meet our housing production plan. We just solved the whole issue. Yeah. Forget the
Neither of
survey.
my children, 33
Mr.
and
Co-Chair.
34. Neither of my children, 33 or 34, have ever cut grass, have ever used a snow blower, don't, mulch gardens. I guess I failed as a father because I did it all, they never did it. I mean, I agree with you. I don't think people in their 20s, 30s, I don't think that they want to necessarily own a home. That's what this is about. That's the population, plus the population that isn't maybe as wealthy, that I envision my involvement in this being to create, that type of housing, because the community needs it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a very valid question. I think this is going to be, very interesting how people answer the question.
Well, that's why I was looking at the word desirable, because it's housing we need and this housing is desirable.
Means which one of these would you desire to live in? Right?
Yeah.
That's really what this is about.
Okay,
Right.
so it's not what we need, it's what we desire. Okay,
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any comment? I can't see any hands. If there's no comment, shall we move on?
I have one. Could we add a column, section which would address the single level houses?
I couldn't quite hear you, Christine. I don't know.
Yep.
She said it doesn't necessarily, well, you know what? I'm reading maybe option 4, cottage housing community. So Christine, I'm reading that as single level.
Not necessarily, because it could be double, a multiple level, even though it's a cottage house.
What
Okay.
about the second one here? If we add in small market rate homes, or small single level market rate homes geared towards seniors?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, good point.
Okay.
Anything else with 11 or shall we move on?
Have we lost any members? Is there, no, seriously.
No,
Looks like
Uh,
a couple of the gentlemen are going.
The only one that I think I don't see now is Gene, but I would think he's still on.
Okay.
I'm still on. I'm still on.
There we go.
Thank you all for staying.
There we go. Here we see.
Okay, so next one asks, in your opinion, what are Upton's most pressing needs related to housing development? And then we get to the CPA question.
I didn't understand. I had a hard time understanding 12 too. I understand the theme of it. And again, maybe it's just because I'm simple, but it's like, it sort of seems to be a whole different question. Could say housing and development. What are the Upton's most pressing needs related to housing and development? And, you know, when you're getting into, there's a lot of pressing needs, like for economic development, everything like that. But this is for housing. So, you know, I didn't understand that question.
You know, I think everybody's going to probably read that question a little bit different. If nobody has their hand up, I don't want to cut the line. If anybody would like to comment, but
I like the question.
I look at that question, and to me, being a small business owner, 3 things jump out to me, which is growing existing local businesses, attracting new business, and decreasing taxes. And I look at that because I feel that part of the reason Laura raises a great point. I hear it all the time. I see it in my neighborhood. The kids graduate school. It's May, the house is on the market. The kids haven't even walked across the stage yet. And they're very, very flat out. My neighbors all tell me the same thing. The tax bill is ridiculous. So, and when you take consumable dollars away from your residents, they don't spend it in business. You know, when you have $5 million in stabilization and various accounts in town, those are dollars that are not out reciprocating in the community. So those 3 jump out at me. Super great question. My second favorite part of the survey.
I think the question is important. I just was confused. I mean, again, the wording confused me because it was housing and development. And they address all these issues because they all do, you know, we want businesses, but I didn't understand why development was put in the question itself. That was my only question.
Kind of along the same lines, it's like, it's just what are our most pressing needs? Because there's a lot in there, you know, so that you could take out related to housing and development. You know, what are our most pressing needs? It'll be interesting to see what people say. I think Steve is on the right track on that too.
Right. And perhaps the comment question there will be important. Maybe we'll get some good feedback out of that particular option.
I like Jean's rewording of it. I think that's really good.
So that was take out housing and development and just ask about pressing needs?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And how do we feel about, I wrote in, please select your top 3. Should I take that out and just, or does this kind of help prioritize?
I think it helps prioritize. Because otherwise I would probably check all of them.
Yeah.
I would get rid of the other again.
Okay, I'm thinking I like the other in this particular question.
Me too. Because it'd be interesting, more investment in our schools. No.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to say the open comments that we get from these surveys are so enlightening. Of course, like the regular questions are great, but the comments that people add in, some people are really, really thoughtful with the comments. They don't use it just as an opportunity to complain about the town or whatever. So I do like to have those others in just to get if there's anything, especially that I'm not aware of. I don't live in town, so this is a really good opportunity for me to understand what's really going on here.
I along those lines, I wonder if, well, you have traffic, improving traffic and sidewalks, but I was just thinking about traffic management. It's getting to be obscene.
And the sidewalks are obscene.
Traffic.
Or few there are.
There is none.
Right.
Yeah, we only have one set of lights in town. Well,
Two.
now we have two sets of lights. Sorry, I forgot. Keep on forgetting the one by Pratt Pond.
Technically 3
Yeah. What's the third one?
by DPW Maple.
Oh,
Oh,
okay, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Very good.
Oh, that's right.
Wow, we've really come a long way. baby.
God.
wow.
How did that one get past you?
Wow.
We were growing up, we had no street lights.
Okay, so we're good with number 12.
Sounds like we're good.
Okay.
I think we've hashed through 13.
Yeah, I like what Jean said on 13. So whatever Jean said.
I don't remember now. So.
It's in the video.
I thought it was eliminated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Basically educate
All
people
right.
on.
Jean, you pared it down to 2 questions, 2 bullet points,
I think, yeah,
and with a yes or a no.
and that's on the tape. So,
Yes.
yes. So we-
Yep.
We'll read it back.
Okay.
And then finally, we have the demographic questions. So we've got what is your age? So different age ranges. How long have you lived here? What best describes your current housing situation? How many people are in your household? And what is your household income? Kathy had made a comment about the income ranges, or maybe it was Joe. Somebody had made a comment about the income ranges. I do want to change these as well. I think you said to increase it because our highest one is 100,000 or more. So increase it up to 175 or 200,000. I think that's what was in the comments.
Yeah, I had mentioned like 150 or 175.
Yeah.
That essentially, we have like $15,000 increments, and those should at least just be like 25.
Yeah.
But
Easily.
I agree.
Okay, so we want that. You want to increase, say, 75 to 124,999, and then the bottom bullet, you want 125 or greater, or 175 or greater?
I think 175 or greater would be, because there's a lot of real rich people in this town. Really scary.
And why don't you have more realistic numbers? Honestly, no disrespect, right? Like,
Yeah.
there are people in the community probably who are in the senior center or whatever that make less than 20, and their opinion obviously matters. But there's no way that you shouldn't have something more than 100,000. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It should be probably 250 and more if you really want to get what this community is. Maybe when I moved here, and I know I'm a newbie, in 1986, even then 100,000. I mean, the homes are selling for.
Right now, the most expensive home is 4.5 million. The
Wow.
cheapest house is $500,000. And the average of what's on the market this morning was 1.275 million.
Wow.
So there is
Welcome
nothing
to
20 to 34 or 35 to 49.
That's irrelevant. I think you can put under 50, 50 to 150, or 50 to 100.
Yeah.
100 to 150.
Emily,
Yeah.
what did Framingham do for theirs? What was their financial one? To me, I think financially we're similar to Framingham, except we don't have a commercial base. I think Framingham's a little bit higher, so I won't say Natick, but are these the numbers that Framingham, for example, used? They're so low.
I didn't work on Framingham's plan. I've worked on Boylston's. I also, one comment is that I want these income brackets, I gotta double check that they align with, the census and the brackets that they use, so we can compare the numbers that we're getting to what the census is saying of folks' income in town.
I just don't think these numbers are in any way, shape, or form realistic.
Yeah, I think it's good to have, I think as Alan said, like the low, because the seniors, in the center probably do make under 12. So I think that's a good gauge. But I think raising it by $50,000 increments makes sense. And then 200 or 250 and above. That would be my recommendation. So 25, 25 to 75, 75 to 125, I mean,
You can put, I know you have to match it with the census, but
too surgical.
there's too many very low income brackets here for Upton.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we are trying to get a sense of who is low income in town too. So seeing who would fall under the very low income category. So we can say in the plan, hey, 5% of people actually fall into this category. We'll look at the number 18, the income question, and then number 17, how many people live in the household. So we can say, based on the survey results, we estimate this many people would actually qualify for affordable housing in town. And that's a point that I do want to make in the plan. So I think we can expand this as well to raise the 100,000. I agree is way too low for this. So I think we can expand it even more, but I do want to keep those brackets in there. So we
just
understand.
add a couple of brackets. Is that what you're saying to do?
Yeah, unless you think people are going to be uncomfortable answering this question, I guess they would just skip it. If they don't want to add their income, they don't have to. But it is an anonymous survey.
People do it for the census. I mean, I tend to think they'll do it for this.
So if it's easier for you to just add, I guess it's just a question of, say, make that 100 to 175,000 and add one other bullet on there or one other option, 175 or greater. Does that make sense? Or do you want to go 100 to 200 and 200 or greater?
I think your first option, I like that, 175 or greater.
1 to 175 and 175 or greater. Does that make sense to everybody or not?
Yeah.
I think the numbers are way too low. Right now, you're gonna get job, you make $18 an hour at Dunkin' Donuts. So you do that times 40, and then whatever you get if you're a good one, as far as tips in the drive-through. I mean, these numbers, I'm trying to think of a community. I don't want to say anything politically incorrect. Community like Chelsea or something. This is not up to financial circumstances. Why do we have numbers that don't reflect? Maybe
You could, I mean, Emily, quite frankly, you would not be in town if you made in the 20 to 34, unless not, even as a single individual, you can't. No, you cannot live in town for those numbers.
But those questions are going to be geared towards your elderly residents that are most likely living in either Coach Road or Millhouse, maybe Upton Inn. It's going to be those particular developments
that's fine. To do it from 0 to 25 and 25 $1 up to 50, and then 50 up to 80. I mean, increase them so that really what the community reflects.
Because a lot of the retirees are making under 50. They're making more like.
What if they work for this state? They're not gonna.
Well, no, just a lot of the folks that I've talked to that, Joe's got his hand up. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say if the committee could give Emily flexibility to make sure that groups align with census and how they break down. If we want to have just 6 bullets and the last one being 200,000 and above, and then Emily can group them to sort of make sure that they can easily align with income data sort of breaks with the census. Then we can probably then just take care of the lower half and leave that to Emily.
Okay. Anybody like or dislike Joe's comment or suggestion?
Sure, let's move forward.
Yeah.
All right,
That's a good idea.
I agree.
okay.
All right, let's see, anything else on this page? I think it's all pretty clear. I think that was the last of the questions, and then we just give people an opportunity, if there's any other comments, maybe that the questions in the survey didn't capture, or they have a story they like to say, something like that. The comments I always find really, really fascinating. And we give people the opportunity, if they want to get updates with this plan. We'll be holding a public forum after this survey is wrapped up. So this is a way we can get the word out. Maybe they want to read a draft of the plan later down the line. So, all right, I think we're at the end
One more
here.
comment, Emily, on the conclusion.
Yeah.
You have, I'm taking over from Laura, the one who's most anal right now. Further input on the preferred housing styles. I would put the word type there, because again, styles to me reflects colonial versus Cape.
Yeah.
So you have
Wait.
preferred housing under conclusion on page 14.
Okay, so for question 11, please rate the desirability of the following housing styles.
No, I'm talking page 14, the conclusion. Very last page of this document.
Oh, gotcha. Oh.
Now there's one more page, yeah. You say preferred housing styles.
Uh-huh.
I would put housing types,
Got it. Okay.
if that makes sense to people.
Emily, didn't you really mean though, what type of affordable housing, whether apartments, whether duplexes? Was that the purpose of that description there?
Yes, when I say housing types or housing styles, is that what I'm
Housing
implying?
options.
Housing
How
options.
about housing options?
Housing
And,
options.
you know, as someone who hates parentheticals, perhaps this is where we need one that says duplexes, apartments,
Single
family, you know, just as an example. Not everything, but just so people know what we're pushing
Yeah.
for.
E.g., yeah. I just didn't think so. Oh, here, how else it's worded? Oh.
We're good with that?
I think we're
Yes.
good.
Yep.
You can have your hold that.
I can't see, okay, so no other comments, I don't see Jane, or Christine, no comments, so we're
No.
That's
Yeah,
all
I'm
right.
fine.
No more comments, it looks
Nope.
like.
Okay, so how do we feel moving forward with this, and how would we like to proceed? Because I can take the next week or so to incorporate edits that we've received tonight and send out the draft as it is, and maybe we could schedule a meeting for like 2 or maybe 3 weeks out, where we could come back, like reconvene and take a vote on the survey. Because there's a lot that we discussed tonight, and some people might want to sit on it a little bit and just rethink some things. So how do we feel about that?
3 weeks should probably give me enough time to do the minutes.
Okay.
3 weeks is fine with me.
Works for me.
Yeah, where does that put us? That's all.
Yeah, with timing, I was gonna say maybe 2 so that we could still get it going.
Middle part of October.
I mean, I think an important thing would be to have it available for the special town meeting November 1st. So I think that's an opportunity where we can at least have the document out. Alan, you mentioned how do we plan on dispersing it to the residents? That would be a good opportunity to certainly have it in print for that event.
That's a
So
good
I think that there's plenty of time. If we meet in 3 weeks, we should be able to finalize it and print the document.
How about 2 weeks?
Plenty of time.
How about we meet every 2 weeks?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was gonna say 2 weeks.
Okay. So 2 weeks.
2 weeks from today is Columbus Day, so I won't be working.
Says either selectmen or planning, so Steve and I would be out.
Right, so let's see.
Ed,
So we might have to do 3 weeks.
Ed.
2 weeks is the 10th, as she mentioned, so,
Is there anything, I mean, are people available that Wednesday or Thursday?
Um,
the 11th, so you won't be available. Yeah, so that, I don't know about that week, or if you want to hold till the 17th, or people rather meet on,
Laura just mentioned the week before.
I mean, I'm good on the 17th, unless people think that's gonna be some sort of a time constraint.
That's why we have a co-chair, right? If one of you aren't here, the other one can move forward.
That's right.
I just thought this, you know, Steve, if you want this for a town meeting, November 1st, or whatever it is, we need to get moving.
Right.
So that's why I said, can anyone do the 12th or the 13th? Because every time we kick it a week, we're gonna come back, and if we have changes, we're not getting this published and in people's hands in another essentially week and a half.
I can do the 12th or the 13th.
I can't do the 12th.
I can't either, so it would be the 13th, if that works for folks.
That should be fine with me.
13th.
Probably not the 13th.
Okay, let's do the 13th.
Okay.
All right. Is 6:30 okay for most
Yeah.
people?
Yep.
Okay.
Time work for everyone?
Okay.
Yep.
I'm assuming the meeting won't go as late as this one. We had a lot to fit on the agenda. Excellent. Okay. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, everyone.
Oh, you're
all your
welcome.
Input. This was fantastic. I'll send out a follow-up email with the updated draft, the agenda, and then work with Chris on the minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
And I can also send out a recording of this as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I had sent
I
out
appreciate that.
I had sent out a
It's
Dropbox.
fun and want to watch it again.
Okay, that's all that I had. Probably want to officially close the meeting.
Okay, I guess I would ask if anybody has any closing comments. If nobody has any closing comments, I would take a motion to adjourn.
I make
So
a
moved.
motion. I second that.
Second the motion. All right, all in favor, please roll call vote. We're going to start with Eugene.
Aye.
Jane,
Aye.
Christine,
I.
Well, I'm having so much fun here.
Aye.
and Stephen, aye. Okay, the meeting is adjourned.